Hello, this is Max Thompson, and this is the first sort of devlog video for my endgame project, which is now being called Cadenza. The endgame project consists of 4 group members: myself, Kirk, Tom, and Marta from the master's course at USW. Um, Myself and Kirk are using this as our main focus project, with Kirk working on some side projects at the same time for other people in the master's course, and Tom and Marta are using this as their side project, while also focusing on their main aspects. Um, this is sort of a follow-on from the previous devlog videos that I did for my game specialization project and exploration and interrogation projects, as they both led into the development for this. Um, I'm planning on making some more devlog videos, obviously as the project progresses, but also including the progress of other people's work as well. So it'll be an overall sort of game devlog as opposed to an individual component devlog. So what, instead of what I'm just working on, what the whole project is being developed with. But yeah, so today's one's just a sort of intro into what the game devlogs will be like, and also the changes for the combat. So in the last sort of game specialization devlogs, I was showing off how I was looking into setting up the combat for the game and how I could make the use of music during the combat. Um, it has updated quite considerably since then, in terms of how the movement works and how the attacking patterns work, but the overall sort of focus of the base outline of the combat is still the same. So during gameplay, the player will find amps throughout the level. Each amp will be of a specific genre, and we're going to be having 4 genres throughout the game. This will be heavy metal, EDM or like electronic style music, hip hop with more of a focus on like New York style hip hop, so like MF Doom, sort of like Biggie, that sort of style. And then also we're going to be looking at introducing sort of like acid music. Um, the previous idea as well was to also have 4 then sort of subclasses on the amps for each sort of attack style. So I initially had like frontman, drums, that sort of stuff. But after doing some looking back and sort of number crunching with how long it would actually take to implement all these sort of different styles, we found just having the 4 main styles would be a lot better focus, as it would allow us to have more time focus on the overall setup of each genre, as opposed to going, right, I've got the genre now, I need to do one for each bit. And also it would make the music sound a bit weird with how we were initially going to do it. So we're focusing mainly just on the genres now and refining those as opposed to having different overall styles. But yeah, here you can see I've got 2 amps in my level. The overall locomotion, by the way, is still the same, so you'll still have the omnidirectional movement for the legs to be updated, as well as the dodge. The dodge will be updated in the future though, with some better animations. These were just some free ones I found, just to actually get included, but we may add some different ones just to add a greater distance to the movement. But yeah, so for example, this was the initial combat system. So we had the lock-on features, the combos, and the sort of auto rotation. But you can see there is some jankiness to it, mainly with that first animation, but that's been because it's been changed for the new combat, so that's okay. But the main feature with the combo system and the light attacks and the heavy attacks are still going to be the same. Sorry, it always makes me laugh whenever I miss. But the main thing that I'd noticed after finishing the work on this was that it's very slow, mainly as well for large groups of enemies. So you can see here, if I attack this guy, it's more of a 1 versus 1 combat approach, So if there was another enemy, I have to run all the way over, or wait for them to come to me and then attack. And you can see there, yeah, there's also a lot of sloppiness with the actual hits. And we weren't really a fan of that with how we were looking at how the game would progress. We wanted it to be a bit more fast-paced, a bit more sort of like Hotline Miami style, sort of like Pistol Whip-esque, very faster paced, especially with the sort of music styles we chose to look at the end. There weren't really any sort of super slow music. Like I think the slowest BPM we're going to be using is 80, which is still pretty fast. So yeah, nothing was too slow, so we wanted to sort of speed it up. Um, and with that, I looked back on some of my research that I did for the game specialization, specifically on the games from the Arkham series, like Arkham Knight, Arkham Asylum, Arkham City as well. And I wanted to look at implementing a sort of free flow style combat system. And this is the end result. Well, I say end result, this is the current stage it's at, but the overall sort of style of how it's working is basically where I want it. So you can see it's a lot better for targeting multiple enemies and flowing through between, and also hit registration is basically every time now. Like you're never going to miss, which I'm very happy with. I forgot to mention as well, I'm currently playing on controller, as you probably noticed, but the game is also still being designed for keyboard and mouse inclusion as well, because the base platform is still going to be PC. But yeah, back to the new combat system. Two main sort of attack styles the player can use is either camera-based or movement input-based. So, for example, if I am looking at Mr. Enemy over here, and I'm not pressing a movement input and attack, it will move to him. If, however, I place the camera in between these two enemies and still doing a movement input, it will find the best angle from the player's eyes between the sort of closest enemy. The other option is movement based. So if I want to attack the guy in front of me, but I don't look at him, and based on his direction from where the player is, down on the input stick, it then attacks him. So then forward, right, left, top right, bottom left, bottom right. Oh, I forgot to do the wrong stick. Bottom right, top left, middle, and there you go. It's a lot better for controller players, as camera sensitivity can be a lot lower on controller, especially with the super slow 360ing, unless you're playing on like Call of Duty Pro player settings. But not everyone's going to want to do that. So this makes it a lot more approachable and a lot more like that Arkham style, because in those games you don't manually target each enemy with the camera, you do it more with your movement. So this just allows it for it to be a lot more free flowing, funny enough. How the code works is when the player attacks, it does a multitude of sphere traces. An initial one to find all the enemies within a set range. It still makes use of the interface system that I initially was using for enemy targeting. So the enemy targeting between the two systems is basically identical. It just gets fired at a different system, at a different time even. It then does a check to see if there's any collidable objects in the way of any of the enemies. So for example, if I do this one, no, it's not going to do it because it's too far away. Oh, there we go. It checks if there's anything blocking any enemies, and then stops that enemy from being added to the best enemy hit list. Because how it also works is it calculates the dot product from the player or the movement input to that enemy, filters through all the enemies within the range, determines which enemy is the best based on distance from the player to that enemy, and also the angle at which either the camera or the movement input is. So for example, I'm looking at that guy, but I move to the left. I'm still going to go to the left because I'm moving, and the movement overtakes priority of the camera in this sense. But if I don't do any movement input, just look at that guy, you can see it does the attack. So it allows for a lot more sort of like choice, even if I'm not moving. It just makes it a lot better for targeting. What else was I going to say? The movement aspect of it went through an initial iteration until I found a better solution. So initially I was using a move to component, which was using the calculations of the best enemy location and rotation, and then just moving the player to that location. But what I was finding was an attack was being inputted, the player would move to the enemy and then attack, and it just looked really janky and actually slowed it down quite a bit. So instead, I did some research and I found a beta plugin for Unreal, which is motion warping. Now, I'd heard of motion warping before, but never actually looked properly into it. I just seen it in like a gaming article or like a Unreal video from a while back of like replicating this style. But with it being actually an implemented feature now, it's quite simple to set up. Basically, you add the component to the player, and then any animations that the player is using, you can add a notify state to that animation, and then during the duration of that animation notifier, that is when the motion warping is fired. So as you can see here, if I look at this guy over here and attack, as I'm moving towards the enemy, the animation is playing. So this allows for a lot better lining up of hits. So as you can see, because I'm always hitting as I get to the player, regardless of the distance, so even if I just do this guy, the speed at which the player moves towards the enemy is adjusted based on the distance and the length of the notify node. So you can see if I do this guy over here, I'm going to move a lot quicker than moving to this guy. But the animation length is still the same. I've drawn a blank. Sorry, something just knocked on my window and it just completely befuddled me. It's so much better than the move to component for what we wanted it to be used for. And I'm really glad that I looked into it and did my research. I still need to do some more research because the next feature we're looking to add is beat synchronization. Now, I'd initially wanted to stray away from using beat synchronization because after researching some games, I'd found that while they'd made use of them, in my opinion, they'd made too much use of them, or they made it their sort of main focus. Like Metal Hellsinger, for example, the beat synchronization is needed to get higher scores, and it's sort of like Guitar Hero style, where you have to be perfectly on the beat to get the best score. How we want to implement it is sort of like Hi-Fi Rush style, where the attacks are synced to the beat. So the player hits the enemy on beat, and it will just make syncing for the music much better. But we're not going to track input versus beat play, so you won't get like debuffed or any buffs based on when you press your input button. Just because we find that we don't really want to have to worry about that, especially if you're just going to be spamming attacks like this. And because the different songs, some of them have a really high BPM, so I think like one of them's the highest is like 140, like I said. You don't want to have to be like constantly spamming boom, 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 boom. just to get it working. Um, but yeah, we'll still sync the attack hits to the BPM. Probably won't sync the dodge just to allow for better uh, combat control for the player, as well as not hampering them if they're playing like a lower BPM sort of attack style, limiting the amount of dodges they can do per second, for example. But yeah, we found that using this sort of style could be really good for helping differentiate the different combat styles as well. Um, the initial way I was going to approach it was by using timelines and having like a preset BPM variable, which would switch depending on what music's played. However, Kirk has pointed me towards using a plugin called FM Mod. Just finished doing some research on. We showed it like the other day. But basically, it extracts the data from the music that's being played and outputs like the beats, the length of the beats, like BPM, and allows you to fire events based on the beat, which is basically exactly what we want. So I'll do some more research onto that, implement that into the combat, and see how I need to adapt it to work with the motion warping to allow for the beat to play on the hit. It sounds fairly complicated, but with the current setup and how we want to implement it, and from what I've initially seen from the FM mod, it is doable. It's just going to be a lot of racking my brain, trying some styles, and then just going from there and then doing some slight tweaks to find the best sort of input. The main other thing as well is the camera style. So you can see the camera isn't linked to the player's direction anymore. I initially had that, and I was finding it was quite jarring, especially with the high speeds. From like going from one player rotation, enemy rotation to another. So we found this sort of style could be best. Might look into doing a sort of like a smooth camera rotation element, but it's not a main concern because worst comes to worst, regardless of if you attack or not, you're still going to hit something, so it'll be okay. But yeah, once the sort of base combat system is finished, getting the BPM syncing all up to date, and getting all the animations we need. That's another thing I forgot to mention. I bought some asset packs for some more animations to add some more styles. I can then work on the actual genre types, getting the music implemented, getting the attack styles and the speed spot on, and then doing the enemy AI, just so we can actually test it against actual moving enemies as opposed to just Billy Mannequin over here. And then transferring those components to a final overall project with the levels as well, so I can actually test it in the actual setting, fine tweak it in case there's anything wrong after implementing it into the actual levels, because testing it in a big open space is all well and good, but once you've got actual components and level components in the way, issues can arise. And yeah, like I said, I'm going to be planning on showing off some other elements throughout the development from the other people's inputs, like Kirk, Marta, and Tom, how their sort of design stuff and the parts that they're creating will feed into my development parts. And yeah, just show the overall design process. We're making good progress so far. I'm very happy with how long this took me to make, or actually how less amount of time it took me to get this working. I thought this was going to take me like 2-3 weeks. It only took me like a week and a half once I discovered the motion warping, because I was at a point before I found out about the motion warping where I was not happy with how the Move 2 component was working. But once I'd found out about motion warping and implemented it, it was just a case of just updating all the existing animations with a notify state and then just adding a line of code to move towards them. But yeah, more sort of update videos to come. The game will take better and better shape. There'll no longer be any placeholder models because Tom is going to be working on some the character models once we've got some concept art from Marta, and we'll be able to show all that stuff off as well. And once Kirk's got the musical components updated and ready to show off, we can add that stuff in and then go from there. But yeah, thank you for watching. Like I said, more stuff to come for Cadenza. Thank you very much.